Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Weather Center Nazario. Happy Hump Day, November 15th, 2023. I'm going to warn you in advance. We have a lot of information to go over today, and I promise you this is going to be the one video to do so, and then for the rest of the week, as things continue to trend down, Lord willing, there'll be a little bit shorter of segments coming forward for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So hang tight with me, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope everything has been great in your neck of the woods. I hope you're seeing some really good rain if you're down here in the southeast. Going to talk all about that in terms of what impacts to expect over the next 48 hours, and deep dive into what the Caribbean is looking at with that disturbance that's expected to form up over the next 36 hours as we go into tomorrow and especially Friday. So guys, like I said, let's jump right in. Fasten those seatbelts. Stay with me. We have a lot to cover. We're going to get right in. All right, so we're starting off on National Hurricane Center's homepage, and honestly, it was a pretty modest but good feeling yesterday when I noticed we advertised here on the Weather Channel that we were expecting our probabilities to start to go down with our area of interest in the Caribbean, and you can see now we are actually at a 40-50 split currently. This has dropped out of the red zone from our initial 70% chance of development over the next 7 days down to a 50% chance, and you can see now that we are getting closer to game time, those 48-hour chances are starting to go up. So really what they're emphasizing here, guys, is not that development chances are going up in the next 48 hours in terms of what could happen over the next 7 days. In reality, as we get closer to the 48-hour window in terms of when we're expecting development, if you look at the calendar, today is the 15th. We were anticipating that by the 17th or the 18th, something may try to take shape down there. So that's why we're seeing our 48 to 7 day hour window beginning to kind of close up, if you will. We have the 40% in the next 2 days because we're getting closer to the 17th, but still at a total of 50% chance as we go over the next 7 days. I hope that makes sense. It's not that development probabilities are going up. They're just trying to mirroring one another because of the fact that this is right about when we were thinking something could possibly form up down there and begin to move off to the north. As you can see in the discussion I have highlighted, we are expecting our recon aircraft to get on down there as early as tomorrow, so we'll get a very, very firm update in terms of whether or not this thing is going to organize, if it's going to go tropical depression. I really don't have any confidence this is going to become a tropical storm, especially looking at our last 48-hour trends across all of our model platforms and the dynamics in play, but we're still in a wait-and-see pattern. Once we get some official guidance from our recon aircraft, it'll tell us a lot of the story going forward. And then yesterday, we also had this highlighted off the southeast coast of Florida for a 10% chance in the next 48 hours and the next 7 days as well, 10% chance echoed there. Don't really think this is going to form up into anything very exciting. We are going to see some very high winds for both Florida, especially along the east coast, and across much of our Bahama Islands out there, especially as it continues to transition up the Gulf Stream before getting pulled in by both of our jet streams and echoed off to the east-northeast across the mid-Atlantic region into the northeast as our next major nor'easter system once it picks up that cold air moving across the northern tier states. All right, we're going to kind of go backwards in comparison to what we did yesterday. We're going to start down in the Caribbean and kind of look at all of our newest data. On the left-hand side, we have our 12Z Euro, and on the right-hand side, we have our 12Z GFS, because thankfully, guys, now that we're getting close to ground zero in terms of whatever may take shape in the Caribbean, our models are now neck and neck with one another, and we're seeing very, very good similarities when you compare and contrast the two of them, to include the Canadian and the Icon alike and other models you want to throw into the mix. As you immediately go through time, we're going to fixate mainly on the Caribbean, guys. You can see that both the GFS and the European model are in agreement that if anything does decide to take shape, it'll either represent a very broad area of low pressure, still lots of rainfall anticipated. We've covered that pretty extensively over the last 5 to 7 days, but it looks like in terms of overall intensity, we're really not anticipating that this thing's going to gain a lot of strength as it goes over the next couple of days, moving out of the southern Caribbean source region up towards Jamaica, eastern Cuba, and Haiti. I know you guys have been very, very emphasized in terms of the heavy rainfall and the flooding potential that we can see. And believe it or not, over the last 12 hours, especially in the last 6, looking at our 06 and our 12Z data this afternoon, we've actually seen a bit more in the terms of the positive trend department, so I want to cover that with you as well. Still not out of the woods to see some very, very heavy rainfall and some very good inundation to induce the flooding, but I'm noticing that it could be a little bit more isolated in nature, which I definitely want to take you in for a very close look and kind of highlight where our greatest potentials are as we stand now. So again, as you go forward in time, not really a whole lot in terms of strengthening. You can see that the GFS does have a closed broad center of circulation with it as it goes over top Hispaniola into the southern parts of the Bahama Islands, the Turks and Caicos. But then on the Euro, if you look, we really don't get a whole lot of organization. In fact, on the European model as of 12 Zulu, it looks a lot more just like a channel of heavy rainfall, like that Caribbean energy, that tropical energy is getting pulled up and out of the Caribbean Sea into the western Atlantic by our deepening system off the southeastern coastline. You can see both of our models are definitely in agreement that a closed low is going to form up and deepen down and actually look a little bit stronger than what our system is anticipated to do in the Caribbean. Just to reinforce those development chances, guys, or at least in terms of our overall intensity, we're going to look at our 10-meter winds, both with the Euro and the GFS. And as we quickly go through time, if you look down there over the Caribbean Sea, both of our models think that maybe we could get up to about a 30, 35 knot threat in terms of what kind of a wind threshold we'll see, whether it be sustained or gusts. I do think we're going to see higher gusts in a lot of not only the rainfall, but the thunderstorm activity that does try to form with this system as it propagates to the east-northeast. But all in all, in terms of a significant wind threat, we're really not seeing too much. Could get a little sporty in our strongest areas of showers and storms, but all in all, guys, in terms of a sustained wind threat or any kind of catastrophic storm surge or any kind of coastal flooding brought on by heavy winds, it looks like that threat is very low, if not nil to none. All right, here we go. So we're going to go real close. We're going to look in detail exactly what Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic could be seeing, and further to the north for that matter, in terms of our total precipitation accumulation. We're starting off on our GFS because, again, we're really seeing a good mirror image or a mirror representation between our Euro and our GFS models. The Canadian and the Icon are very close as well, but unfortunately I can't really pull up all that data here on Weather Nerds to zoom in and show you guys up close and personal what it is that we're forecasting at this point. So as you take the GFS through time, it does look like late in the day, if not mid-afternoon tomorrow into tomorrow night, Thursday, is when the worst conditions are likely to start to settle in for Jamaica, especially the eastern half of the island. And we are still seeing that stark contrast between the east side of the island and the west, where you can see as early as 18Z on Friday, we are expecting almost a foot of rainfall anticipated for eastern Jamaica, whereas on the left-hand side or the west-hand side of the island, we're actually going between 0 to 2 inches of overall accumulation as the system gets pulled into the north. And I think the main reason the models are thinking this way is because as that energy up to its north off the southeast coast of the United States, off the Florida coastline for that matter, as that intensifies and begins to create such a large sphere of influence, as that energy gets pulled out of the Caribbean, that's what's going to get it moving up to the north towards you guys in the Caribbean islands, the Greater Antilles. As that happens, it's going to elongate the precip field. And as such, I do believe that's also why our models are really losing confidence that this is going to have the opportunity to consolidate into a full-fledged depression, let alone become our next named storm. So at this point in time, guys, I think it's safe to say we're not going to see Vince, but we could definitely see a pretty heavy rainfall tropical level event. You continue further and further into the loop, and as I'd mentioned, it looks a little bit more like we're going to see more isolated instances of heavy rainfall. If you guys remember tuning in yesterday, I'll kind of draw it for you. We were seeing widespread inundation for much of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and a lot more coverage expected for eastern Cuba, spanning up into the Turks and Caicos and the Bahama Islands just off to the north-hand portion of the chart here. You can see now that Haiti, unfortunately, especially the west and southwest region of that island, is anticipated to get anywhere between 8 to 10 inches according to the GFS, but if you look, a lot more of the Hispaniola Island to its entirety is spared a large amount of that heaviest rainfall activity in comparison to what we were seeing yesterday, where the levels between 6, 8, 10, and even upwards of a foot, if not more, rainfall spread out over a larger area of influence. We're not out of the woods in terms of seeing some very intense flooding and a lot of rainfall all in one bout, so we're going to keep a close eye on if we see any kind of wiggling or wobbling in these forecasted projections, and especially once we do get a little bit of organization in our thunderstorm field, how much of it is going to consolidate and kind of create that narrow channel, hopefully moving in between the islands for the most part. We're going to do a quick sanity check looking at the 12Z Euro now, and as you take this through time, you can see that the Euro is now on board with seeing a lot more coverage for Jamaica to its entirety. The western portions of the island could see anywhere between 3 to 4 inches, and on the east side, we're looking at between maybe 7, 8, 9 inches at best, according to the European model. And the Euro actually has an even better case scenario unfolding, where you could see a lot of Haiti is spared from the heaviest rainfall. Maybe the very easternmost tip of Cuba could see some heavier pockets of rainfall, but again, the totals are starting to come down down a little bit. So folks, the area I want to emphasize the most is we are ahead of the game here. We've been projecting these total amounts for quite a little bit of time now. I do want to remind you that the flood threat is going to continue on and it will exist throughout the entirety of this situation. And as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to safely get you through it. And anytime I see a little bit of positive trends popping up on my charts, on all the data I'm trying to ingest and digest for you guys to communicate in these videos, I'm going to make sure to make that readily apparent, because it looks like we are still seeing very small, but albeit still positive trends out there. So just be cognizant of exactly what kind of rainfall you're getting in your area. Make sure if you need to go to a higher elevation area, watch for collecting or rushing water down in the low levels, anything that's trying to pool up or collect on roadways, river crossings, etc. Guys, you know the name of the game. We've definitely seen some heavier rainfall down there before, and it looks like we're trying to make it a little bit more localized in terms of what this event could look like. So it goes without saying, be safe and be mindful of when you start to see those heavier rainfall bouts begin. It looks like the main event is going to happen as we go throughout the day on Friday and into Saturday for you guys in Cuba, Hispaniola. And as you get further to the north, Jamaica could see it a little earlier. It looks like tomorrow afternoon, as early as the middle of the day, Thursday into Friday morning, is when the worst is going to be on top of you guys. Once again, just to reinforce that timing, as you take this simulated reflectivity loop through time, you can see we have rainfall already beginning the middle of the day tomorrow, Thursday at 18Z. That is about the 2 o'clock time frame for my folks down there in Jamaica. So around 1 to 2 o'clock, just shortly after the lunch hour, if you will, is when we're going to start to see those heavier pockets of rain begin to work their way into that area. And of course, that is when your flood risk is going to really rapidly escalate. And you may also see the occasional cloud to ground lightning strike. So you definitely want to stay indoors and hunker down as this event goes through. It's not going to be anything catastrophic. We're not looking at anything in terms of what we were initially anticipating. I know the GFS, for starters, was thinking a Category 4 hurricane, and you can rest assured we're not going to see anything near that extent. You want to shelter in place and make sure that you're aware of your surroundings and watch your environment closely as we get through this rain event. Moving through time and we go into Friday, you can see the cluster of strongest precipitation is going to move right in between Hispaniola and Cuba, to where we could see the heaviest accumulation as we go through Friday and into very early Saturday morning, before hopefully it begins to clear out and we just see some residual effects still getting dragged up to the north, with both of those prominent systems transcending the east coast of the U.S., kind of moving into the Bermuda area as we go through Saturday and Sunday. All right, I know we have a lot to cover. We're going to try to blast through these products as quick as we can. We're going to take a look at what National Weather Service is thinking for our Gulf Coast and our Florida locations. You can see that we do have a marine threat in effect for our Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida Panhandle coastlines. You can see anywhere between 20 to 30 knots sustained winds, all the way up to 45 knot gusts. And this is going to take place happening now with that system off the coastline, going through most of the day Thursday and maybe into the very early periphery of Friday morning. Still during the overnight hours, we'll start to see that system move far enough to the south to loosen up its influence on your neck of the woods. Once again, we have our coastal hazards here, as we've been kind of discussing over the last couple of days now. It looks like we could see anywhere between 6 to 9, maybe even 10 feet right along the coast, with higher surf out there off the coastline. So be aware, beach erosion is definitely going to be a big threat. We're definitely looking at very life-threatening rip currents. You can see it at the top there. Rip currents are going to be a big deal. So even if it's not raining in your area, folks, as this system works its way through and begins to move away, try to stay out of the water. Make sure that you're not taking any unnecessary risks as this goes on. I know this isn't characterized as an event, but when we get to the observations, you could almost argue that we have a subtropical storm just kicking it kind of off the Gulf of Mexico coastline. As that system begins to work its way up the Gulf Stream waters of the Florida East Coast, this is what we have going on along most of our coastal National Weather Service departments. They've echoed the same kind of warnings across the east coast of Florida, starting in the southeast all the way up towards Jacksonville is what I have pulled up here. Again, beach erosion, dangerous surf conditions to include rip currents, 30-40 mile an hour gusts with a rough surf estimated between 4 to 8 feet. So again, guys, we really don't want to take any risks that we really don't have to. This is going to be over before you know it, and at the end of this video, I'm very excited to unveil exactly how good the weather is going to get for us down here in the southeast just in time for Thanksgiving. So as I mentioned, if you look, this is going to be our National Weather Service interactive observation overlay. We used this for Tropical Storm Ophelia a number of weeks ago as that system made its way onshore over the mid-Atlantic states. And you can see, if you'll kind of follow the wind barbs here, we do have a very prominent cyclonic swirl out there over the eastern and central parts of the Gulf of Mexico. And right in through here, if you look at some of these buoy readings, we are seeing some pretty good winds and wind gusts with this system. As as you get closer to the center of circulation. Along the coastline of the Florida Panhandle into Alabama and Mississippi, we're seeing anywhere between 28 to 30 knot gusts, so approaching that tropical depression threshold if you wanted to do a comparison. And right around where that center is situated, if you look, we have 47 to even 58 knot gusts. Closest to where that center of circulation is percolating off the coastline of Florida and the other Gulf Coast states. On satellite, it's looking kind of subtropical storm-ish. We don't have it characterized. This is still considered a bona fide El Nino type of low pressure. We probably won't see any kind of classification come out before this is over and done with, but we are still seeing very reminiscent effects. Even throughout the Florida East Coast, if you guys looked way down there, even in southeastern Florida, we are seeing 25 to 30 plus knot gusts with this storm activity as it pushes its way onshore. If you take a look at the radar for that area, we are already seeing very, very heavy rainfall extending across the Keys through south and into central Florida for that matter, and this is going to persist for about an 18 to 24-hour window, which is why we are anticipating very good instances of localized floodings, especially in that southeast quadrant of the Florida Peninsula. And we're not forgetting about the Bahamas as well. You guys are definitely going to see some action with this as well as it takes shape and moves off to the east-northeast. Moving right along, we're going to look at our NSSL model from yesterday. I like to reference this, especially as we have all of our high-res data populating for this weather event. You can see along the Gulf coastline, particularly Mississippi, Alabama, into the Florida Panhandle, and across South Florida for sure. We're already seeing heavy rainfall beginning, and it looks like this is going to definitely be an extended event until we get into the back end of tomorrow even. As you can see, that storm system off the Florida East Coast really gets going, guys. So if you're seeing some elevated winds down there in the south and east portions of the Florida Peninsula, anticipate those winds are going to go up at least for the next 6 to 12 hours as that system deepens and tries to get away from us, beginning to make that east-northeast kind of track away from Florida across the Bahamas. This is going to be a prolonged event, so very similar to what we're expecting down in the Caribbean. We can't rule out the possibility that we're going to see some very, very good accumulation down there near the Palm Beach and Miami-Fort Lauderdale area. Some of our models indicating the threat for 6 and upwards of even a foot of rainfall down there as well. And we are going to see that coastal threat for inundation increase with those strong winds, as you can see indicated on our right-hand side chart. Some of the winds across the Bahamas even edging into that 50 to 60 knot threshold. We're going to see how this shakes out. There is a little bit of discontinuity between some of our high-res models. Other models, to include the 3-kilometer NAM and the HRRR, think we could bottom out at about 40 to 45 knot gusts. But regardless, this is to be taken seriously. That's really going to give you some good wave height, some very bad beach erosion, some bad coastal effects, to include that rip current threat we highlighted earlier. So it goes without saying, we got to wait it out until it's done, and then we're looking at good weather once this can move on downstream. All right, we're almost done, guys, I promise. I know this is a very lengthy segment. I'm working hard for all you guys, and I hope you've stuck with me up to this point. We're getting close to the back end, and I got good news in store for you, I promise. We're just doing a quick sanity check. Like I mentioned, if you look at our overall forecasted winds, we have our Meso FV3 on the left-hand side and our HRRR on the right. And if you look, we are anticipating still, regardless of where that system begins to form up, the coastline is expecting anywhere between 40 to 50 knot gusts during the worst of this event as we go through Thursday and into the early half of Friday. By the time we get into the weekend, it looks like those conditions are going to start to taper off. You can see on the left-hand side, unfortunately, the right-hand side chart is already at its end 48 hours out. But as we get into the late in the day, Friday afternoon, early evening hours, and then into Saturday, you can see we transition to more so a predominantly northerly flow, and we start to clear out a lot of that significant weather activity for us across the southeast. Last but not least, as we discussed, very high surf offshore, rip currents along the coastline, along the beaches. You can see that this is our significant wave height. We have seen a little bit of a downward trend along the east coast of Florida. It looks like now the European model, as a 12 Zulu today, is anticipating we could maybe peak in terms of about 22 to 25 foot swells off the coastline. But again, regardless, as we saw on National Weather Service's page, this is going to translate to about between 6 to 10 foot waves if you're right there on the coast looking at the water coming in. And with those winds forcing that water up against the seashore, we're definitely going to see those sand walls and the sea walls start to wear down, very reminiscent of what we saw with Tropical Storm Ian last year, with Hurricane Nicole, and other East Coast impacts we've seen in the past, guys. You know how a lot of this stuff works. All right, we are ready to conclude. We're going to look at the United States, and we're going to do a very, very preliminary forecast for the Thanksgiving holiday, because I, for one, am very excited for what I see on the horizon. Here in Florida specifically, we kind of missed the cold weather event for our Halloween holiday, but but it looks like Thanksgiving, especially for all of you guys out there taking a whopping 4-day vacation from your work to enjoy it with your families and friends, we're in for some really solid weather. So as you look at the GFS and we take this through time, we get another round of very, very heavy rainfall with our next system expected to take shape over the Great Plains coming off the lee of the Rockies. But if you look at the timestamp, this is Wednesday going into Thursday. Look at all that cold air advection right behind this system, just in time to work its way across the Gulf Coast, into the Gulf of Mexico, and through Florida to its entirety, and the rest of the East Coast for that matter, to clear things out and cool us down substantially. You guys in the Northeast and the Great Lakes region, the Midwest, you are going to have to do battle with some very frigid temperatures, some good wind chill factors as well, with those elevated surface winds and a lot of wraparound snowfall with this system as it deepens down and moves into the eastern Canadian provinces. But even shortly thereafter that, all the bad weather activity is going to clear out until our next system begins to take shape, coming out of the Rockies and the Dakotas, out of the lower Great Lakes region, for our next round of heavy snowfall and rain. To reinforce this, if we go to our anomaly chart and you take this through time, it goes without saying, there's our system, and look at how cold of air we're expecting to come down with it. And as you go through Tuesday, Wednesday, and into Thursday for our Thanksgiving festivities, and we can't forget good old Black Friday shortly after that, if you guys are going to be out and about doing some shopping for Black Friday, we're in for some very, very good weather, guys, and I couldn't be more overjoyed, especially with everything we've been covering all this week and last week. I think this is a very good finale for not only what the tropics have been throwing at us, but in terms of ringing in the holiday season full time. Thank you all for joining me. For those of you who stuck around to the end of this video, it's been a long-winded spiel, and I do apologize. I wanted to kind of exhale as much information to you as possible so we can kind of clear the air as we go into our Tropics Talk tonight at 8 p.m., which I hope to see you there, and our Thursday, Friday weekend segments as we get ready to round out the latter half of the week. I hope everything is great for you guys. For those of you watching from the Caribbean and down there in Southeast Florida, or the Gulf Coast for that matter, stay safe. We're going to keep you safe. We're going to keep you ahead of this bad weather activity as best we can here in the Weather Center and across other weather channels for that matter, far and wide. Thank you all again for joining me this Wednesday afternoon. We'll see you again tonight for our 8 p.m. Tropics Talk. But until then, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.